Ever feel like your brain's hit the fast forward button, but your body's stuck on pause, especially when it's time to sleep?
It's that frustrating disconnect that so many people with ADHD experience, and it's often overlooked.
And that's what we're diving into today. The often misunderstood link between ADHD and sleep.
Right, because it's more than just, oh, I have trouble sleeping. It's about how ADHD, at its core, can make sleep a real battle.
We've got a stack of research here that really gets into the nitty-gritty of it all.
And what's fascinating is that these two, ADHD and sleep, they're often treated as separate issues.
When in reality.
They're totally intertwined, like two sides of the same coin.
And understanding that connection, that's got to be crucial for finding the right strategies.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in.
All right, so when we talk about ADHD messing with sleep, we're going beyond just those occasional restless nights, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about how the very nature of ADHD, those core experiences, can make it tough to just, switch off at bedtime.
So paint a picture for us. What does that actually feel like for someone with ADHD?
Well, imagine trying to fall asleep,
Right.
but your brain's like a room full of distractions, all buzzing at once.
Okay, I can see how that wouldn't exactly scream, time to sleep.
Right, and that's what we're talking about, difficulty focusing, that constant mental overdrive. Acting impulsively, it all plays into this.
And we're not just talking about kids here either, right?
No, not at all. Adults with ADHD, they can feel this acutely, especially with the demands of work, relationships, you name it.
Life throws a lot at you, and when you're already wired differently.
Exactly. It's like trying to juggle with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good segue into the role of medication.
Okay, medication, because we're talking about how these medications actually work in the brain.
Yes, and how that in turn can impact sleep, sometimes in surprising ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's break it down. We've got stimulants like our Ritalin, Adderall, that sort of thing.
Right, so these medications, they target specific brain chemicals, namely dopamine and norepinephrine.
Dopamine, norepinephrine, those ring a bell. Aren't those involved in like attention and focus?
Exactly. Think of them like messengers in the brain, helping regulate those functions.
Okay, so the messengers are a little,
Sluggish. You could say that. So stimulants basically give those messengers a little nudge.
a nudge, more like a kickstart, right?
Yeah.
At least that's how I always imagined it.
That's a good way to put it. They boost the availability of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain.
So it's like giving those messengers a strong cup of coffee.
You know what? That's actually a pretty good analogy. It's about increasing alertness, focus, all those things.
Makes sense. But we've also got our non-stimulant options, right? Things like Strattera and Intuitive.
Yes. And they work a bit differently. They take a different route.
From the research you shared, it seems like those are less about that immediate kick in the pants and
Yeah.
more about a gradual, steady approach.
Exactly. So Strattera, for example, that one works primarily on norepinephrine.
Okay.
While Intuitive, it focuses on these receptors in the prefrontal cortex.
And forgive me, but just a quick refresher, the prefrontal cortex, that's like the,
The command center.
right, planning, decision-making, impulse control, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And the key thing to remember is these medications, they tend to have a slower onset.
Okay.
They're not that sudden boost. It's more gradual. And that's often why they're chosen, to manage different side effects.
So we've got these different meds working in different ways, but the big question is, how do they all tie into sleep? Especially when some are designed to, like, boost alertness.
It's a good question. And the research, it really highlights this complex relationship between ADHD, medication, and sleep. It's fascinating, really.
Fascinating might be an understatement from what I'm seeing here. It's like a whole other layer gets added to the mix.
It is. But let's break it down, make it a little less...
Overwhelming.
Exactly. So let's start with probably the most common sleep disruptor for folks with ADHD, insomnia.
Insomnia. And we're not just talking about the occasional bad night here and there.
Right. This is chronic. Difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or both.
Yeah.
And it's not just the feeling of being tired, it's...
Because that already takes a toll. Wow.
Absolutely. But imagine trying to function with all those ADHD challenges, the inattention, impulsivity.
Oh, that's great. It's like already being at a disadvantage.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you're running on empty, no sleep. It's like It's like trying to run a marathon with, I don't know, weight strapped to your ankles.
Okay, yeah, that paints a pretty rough picture. And from these studies, insomnia is not the only sleep disruptor.
Right, it's not. Another one is restless leg syndrome, RLS. Have you heard of that one?
RLS, yeah. Isn't that where you feel like you constantly have to move your legs? What's actually happening there?
It's this weird sensation, like tingling, aching, almost like an itch deep inside your legs, but you got to move to relieve it.
And it gets worse at night, right? Making it even harder to sleep.
Exactly. So you're already battling that ADHD brain that wants to stay up, and then RLS just throws another wrench in the works.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And we're not even done, are we? There's something called PLMD too, right?
There is periodic limb movement disorder.
Okay, that one's a little less familiar. What is that?
So picture this.
Mm.
You're asleep, or at least you think you are, but your legs are like twitching and jerking involuntarily all night long.
Oh, wow. So even if you manage to fall asleep, that can disrupt it.
Yeah. And these movements, they can be strong enough to pull you out of those deep sleep stages. So even if you're in bed for a while, you don't wake up feeling rested.
Man, this is making my legs feel restless. But seriously, knowing about this stuff, that's got to be half the battle, right? Like, at least you can start connecting the dots.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And speaking of, there's also sleep apnea, which, while not as directly linked to ADHD as, say, insomnia, it's still more common in people with ADHD.
Right, sleep apnea, where your breathing stops and starts during the night.
That's the one. And it can really mess with your sleep quality, not to mention some potential health risks down the line.
Wow, so you've got insomnia, RLS, PLMD, and potentially sleep apnea. It's like a perfect storm of sleep disruptors. No wonder getting a good night's sleep feels impossible sometimes.
It really is a lot. And it highlights that this connection between ADHD and sleep, it's not just in your head.
Yeah.
It's real physiological stuff impacting your ability to get that rest.
Okay, so we've laid out the challenges. Now what about solutions? We talked about medication earlier, but I'm guessing it's not as easy as popping a pill and good night.
You're right, if only it were that simple. Medication can be really helpful for managing the ADHD symptoms, but its impact on sleep, well, it's kind of a two-way street.
A two-way street. Okay, now I'm really interested. What do you mean?
Well, in the short term, some people, especially those who are new to ADHD meds, might find it a bit harder to fall asleep.
Especially if they're on stimulants, right? Like if it's helping you focus during the day.
Exactly. It makes sense that it might make it harder to wind down later, like trying to fall asleep after a big old cup of coffee.
Or 3. Some days call for it. But so what you're saying is those meds, they can kind of ramp up your alertness for a while.
They can. And for a lot of people, that effect, it tends to fade as their body adjusts. It's like your brain figures out, okay, now it's focus time, now it's sleep time.
So for anyone listening who might be new to ADHD meds, don't freak out if you have a few nights of tossing and turning.
Exactly. Your body might just need some time to adjust. And there are things you can do to minimize those initial side effects too.
Like being strategic about when you take your meds, right?
Right.
I'm seeing in these studies that taking them earlier in the day can help a lot.
Absolutely. Timing is key. If you take your medication earlier, it gives your body more time to process it before you hit the hay.
Makes sense. So those initial sleep disruptions, they're often temporary. What about the long term? Like if you're on ADHD medication for a while, how does that affect sleep in the long run?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Some people find that their sleep actually improves with medication.
Really? Even though those meds are designed to help you be more alert. I wouldn't have guessed that.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to that cycle we talked about earlier, where ADHD messes with your sleep, and then bad sleep makes the ADHD worse.
Right. It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. And sometimes medication helps to break that cycle.
So by managing the ADHD symptoms more effectively, you're indirectly improving your sleep quality as well.
You got it. Less hyperactivity, better focus during the day. It can lead to a more balanced sleep-wake cycle overall.
Okay, so it's like finding that balance we all crave, that sweet spot. But you're saying it doesn't always work out that neatly for everyone?
Right. Unfortunately, some folks might still have sleep problems even when they're on medication long term. It really shows how complex our brains are and how we all respond differently.
No one-size-fits-all solution, sadly. But that just highlights how important it is to have that open communication with your doctor, right?
100%. They can help you figure out the best approach for you, whether it's adjusting the medication, the timing, or even looking at other options.
It's about finding what works best for you. And that might take a bit of trial and error.
It might. But the key is that open dialogue with your healthcare provider.
Because they're the experts in the science and the medication, but you're the expert on you.
Exactly. It's a two-way street, working together to find the best path forward.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from how ADHD and sleep are connected to some practical tips for getting those Z's. But it seems like the main takeaway here is you don't have to figure this out on your own.
You got it. Having a supportive healthcare team in your corner can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
So,
So let's talk about that. What does that open communication with your doctor look like?
well, first off, don't hold back.
Hmm.
I know it can be easy to downplay sleep problems like, it's not a big deal, or worry about being that patient who complains about everything.
Right. But when it comes to sleep,
It's crucial to speak up, even if you think it's something small, because what seems minor could actually be a sign of something bigger.
that makes sense. So you're saying even if you're not sure, it's better to say something than to just kind of brush it off.
Absolutely. Because sometimes the fix could be simple, like tweaking the timing of your meds, changing the dosage a bit, or even just looking into a different medication altogether.
So it's really about finding that sweet spot that works for you, which, let's be honest, sometimes takes a bit of trial and error.
It does. And that's why that open communication, that back and forth with your doctor is so important. Think of it like a partnership.
Because they have the medical expertise, but you know your body best. You're living it every day.
Exactly. You're the expert on you. So it's about sharing information openly, working together to find the best path forward.
It's like that saying, teamwork makes the dream work. Or in this case, teamwork makes the sleep work.
I like that. And that's really what it's all about, managing those ADHD symptoms effectively and getting the restful sleep you need. Because honestly, when you're sleeping better, you're just more equipped to handle everything else life throws at you.
It's all connected. We've explored the science, the challenges, and most importantly, those glimmers of hope that come with understanding these connections and realizing you've got options. And for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now, just remember, you've already taken that first step. By simply being here, being curious, wanting to learn more, you're on the right track. Knowledge is power. And now you're armed with a deeper understanding of this complex relationship between ADHD and sleep.
Couldn't agree more. And as you navigate this journey towards better sleep, here's something to think about. We've talked about those sleep tracking apps, right? Have you ever considered giving one a try? Some of them are really incredible. They can give you so much insight into how your body responds to treatment, to lifestyle changes, heck, even to certain foods you're eating. It's like having this little sleep detective in your pocket, gathering clues about what helps you thrive and what might be throwing a wrench in your sleep routine.
That's a great point. It can be so empowering to actually see those patterns, connect the dots between your daily habits and how well you're sleeping. Well, there you have it. A deep dive into the often misunderstood world of ADHD and sleep. We've talked about the science, the struggles, and most importantly, that hope that comes with understanding and taking charge of your sleep. Until next time, sweet dreams.